Thanks, Joe. And for anyone who's never met me before, surprise, it's not a guy. That's usually the first thing. It's like, it's a woman. So today I'm here to talk to you about collaging. And let me just bring it up and play. Okay, so here we go. So collaging is a needs elicitation technique. It's a technique that we use to learn more about end users, let's just say, or participants. And it's a way to get deeper into what their world is in order to be able to design better for it. So rather than just spending this 90 minutes, which is a long time, just talking to you about collaging, I'm actually going to involve you in a collaging exercise. And the reason why is because I'm a big fan of this Chinese proverb. Tell me and I forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I understand. So we're going to do that today. After these 90 minutes, you will be able to leave here and actually do your own collaging exercise if you want to. That's the goal. So to get started and to dive right in with actually showing you, not just talking to you, we're going to do a little demonstration here. So first let me ask, how many people here use Facebook? All right, keep your hands up. How many of you use it every single day? Keep your hands up. Okay, how many of you use it multiple times a day? Checking it multiple times a day? What's your name? Dan. Dan, would you mind being my volunteer?
Not at all.
Okay, great. Let's give Dan a round. Yay. God knows I hate that, so I appreciate it. So if you wouldn't mind coming up here, I am actually going to do a live demonstration of a collage right here. And Dan is going to be my participant. So, love it or hate it, Facebook is in our lives, right? So this is an old screenshot of my Facebook page, probably like 2 years ago now. It's way different. But, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. I wish I could just drop it, but it just keeps pulling me back in. So, unfortunately, I'm on it much more than I should be. But I want to learn more about how Dan uses Facebook. And I am going to pretend that I am a UX researcher that works for Facebook. And I need to learn more about my end users. Now, there's a lot of different ways I could go about this information, right? I could just sit down with him with a clipboard with predefined questions and just, you know, talk about, like, so how often do you visit? What do you look at? Or I could do something a little more unstructured, which is collaging, which is what this is about. So, there are a lot of pictures here, Dan. And you guys can't see this, but don't worry. You will in a minute. So what Dan is looking at is approximately, I'm going to say 100 to 150 very random pictures. And Dan, what I'd like you to do is just to take your time, take a look at the pictures, and I'd like for you to pick out pictures that represent your experience with using Facebook. And there are some over here as well. Now these are all stickers that you just peel back. These right here, I ran out of stickers. So these, you get to use the glue stick. It takes you right back to childhood. It's really fun. So what I'd like for you to do is when you pick out a picture, just stick it on here, either with the sticker or the glue stick. And then if you wouldn't mind, just writing a caption that kind of captures why you chose that picture and how that picture relates to your experience with using Facebook.
Okay.
And pick out as many as you want. You can use both sides of the paper if you want to.
All right.
You can just walk around. Just be careful. There's some wires here.
Okay.
Any questions at all about that activity before I let you go off to it? Okay, we're going to let Dan do that. I'm going to talk a little bit why he does that. So this is literally what it is. It's as easy as that. But you want to see what Dan's seeing. Let's take a look. So here's what Dan's looking at. A whole bunch of very random, very odd pictures, some of them. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason why they're random. There's nothing that's overly negative, overly positive, no nature themes or animal themes. I want it to be as random as possible. Some are abstract, some are funny, some are really they could be depressing. What matters is what they mean to you. Art is a powerful stimulus. You could look at this as art, right? And what's amazing is when you look at pictures or you hear music, it can touch you in a way that it might not touch someone else. It's very personal. And that's, as a researcher, I love getting at that. I want to get to that deep level. And sometimes just sitting down with a clipboard just doesn't get to that deep level, you know? So looking at doing something else like this, where it's something that's powerful, where you're getting at the whys. Why does this mean something to them? That's what's really great. So some of you might be thinking in your head right now, you know, let's just get to the dirt, you know? You want to know how he uses Facebook? Just ask him. Why are you having him pick out these pictures? It's a great question. And the reason is because sometimes the most important question is the one that's not asked. It's elicited. The collage that's being created becomes a conversation starter. It's a way for the participants to realize needs that exist beneath their own level of awareness, even. So it's an icebreaker, catalyst for discussion. And what's important to remember is sometimes when I sit down with a participant, I may not even know what I want to ask them. Or, more importantly, I may know what I want to ask, but have no clue how to ask it because it's too personal or too sensitive. And I'm just a stranger that they just met. How am I going to get this person to open up to me? So that's one of the reasons why I have them do this collage instead. Now, I love tattoos. And this is a good example of collaging to me, or a projective technique. Tattoos are great because they mean something. You don't ink yourself for life without something really meaning something. Or sometimes you do, and that's the best story, right? Where it's like really, I had no good reason for getting this tattoo. I just got it one day. I love those stories. So whenever I see a tattoo, I'm always really curious. And I know it's not polite to ask, so I'm usually pretty careful about that. But if I know the person well enough, I'll be like, okay, so tell me the story behind the tattoo. And that's exactly what collaging is, just as an example. So I have a babysitter, and I've known her for like 2 years. She's watched my boys. And one day I happened to notice that she had a tattoo. I'm like, how did I not know you did, you know, I've never seen it. I'm like, so what's that about? Because it wasn't obvious what the tattoo was about. And she told me about her 5-year cancer struggle. And she's a 29-year-old girl. It's just like, what? And it was really amazing. We had this wonderful conversation about it. And at the end of it, I was like, so, do you have any other tattoos? And she did. And it was about her mother's cancer struggle. And for 2 years, I've known her, and we never had this conversation, never came out. Not that it necessarily would, but that just shows that until something comes out like a powerful stimulus like that, you really don't get to sometimes some deeper things that you could know about people. And what was really interesting was what she chose to put on her body to represent that. And it wasn't like, you know, a cancer symbol or something like that, or a pink ribbon. It was something very meaningful to her, which I found the most fascinating, not the fact that she was a cancer survivor. So I learned a lot about her. So all of this is called projective techniques. This is not new. Not new. I want to stress that. This is hundreds of years old. Collaging has been around for a very long time in different forms. And of course, as you could probably guess, its roots are born in psychology. And I always joke with people who are doing what Dan's doing right now that at least it's not a Rorschach test, right? It's not that we're not getting into the depths of your personality, although we might a little bit. But a Rorschach test is similar. If you're not familiar with the Rorschach test, it's called the ink blot test. A psychologist or psychiatrist shows the ink blot to their patient, and they're supposed to tell them what they think it looks like, and that's supposed to give them a glimpse into their personality and understanding into their motives. This is created by Herman Rorschach in the 1920s. I think he wrote the book in 21, died a year later, and never saw the popularity of it. A little trivia there. Another one, Thematic Apperception Test, or TAT. This one's really interesting. In an official TAT deck, you have 31 cards of really dramatic images. And what the patient is supposed to do is think of the most dramatic story they can imagine as to why that picture came to be. And that's supposed to reveal a little bit as to what's going on in their world, in their mind. Another one, Kinetic Family Drawing. This one's really interesting to me because it's done with children mostly. It's supposed to be where you get a glimpse into the child's family life by having them draw a self-portrait of their family doing something, hence kinetic, which I think is wildly revealing. I love these techniques. Sentence completion tests, been around since the 1800s with Carl Jung's word association tests. think about these sentences here. I regret. I need. I secretly. If you answered any one of them, you'd be revealing a lot about yourself. Pretty personal stuff. I love it. This one's pretty funny. This one's probably the newest of the projective techniques. It was patented in '95, thought of by Gerald Zaltman, and he's wildly popular in this world of research. And his metaphor is called the Zaltman Metaphor Elicitation Technique, the ZMET. And it's very similar to collaging. It's instead of having the participants pick out pictures in front of you, they actually do homework. And they pick out pictures, they could be family pictures that they're bringing in, they could be pictures in a magazine, and they're supposed to be picking out pictures that relate to some topic and bring them in for discussion. So a slightly little twist to it. And what's funny about this, I don't know if you can tell in the screenshot here, this is a screenshot from the documentary, The Greatest Movie Ever Sold. It's a very funny documentary by Morgan Spurlock, and he did Super Size Me. And so in this one, it's pretty funny. What he's doing is a ZMET on himself to try to find out what brands would pay for his movie. It's really funny. But when I was watching it, I'm like, oh my God, he's doing a ZMET. The research geek in me loved that. Okay. So common use is another field. So great, we use it in psychology. What about elsewhere? Marketing. So I don't know if you can see right here, but the lime is urinating into the Pepsi. You can't really tell in the slide, but it's pretty funny. This elicits a pretty strong response, right? I'm not sure how much I want a Pepsi Twist right now, but it elicits a response. And marketers use this all the time, techniques like collaging, to gauge reactions to brands, reactions to ads. So this has been around a long, long time in marketing. Management. Could you imagine walking into your boss's office or HR and having to do a collage to just try to understand what your motives are? It's happening. People are actually doing techniques like this. Sociology, how do people adapt to new programs? Cultural anthropology. So the ZMET, Gerald Zaltman actually created the ZMET out of a trip that he took in Nepal. And he wanted to better understand the people of Nepal, and he didn't want to just take pictures and kind of document his trip himself. He wanted it to be done in a different way. So what he did was he had the locals that he met. He gave them disposable cameras, and he said, please, I want to know more about your village life. Take pictures for me. And they did. And then he went back to them after they were developed, and he, through an interpreter, had them explain why they took these pictures. And something interesting happened. He noticed that on most of the pictures, their feet were cut off. And they were cut off because being barefoot is a sign of poverty, and that's a stigma you do not talk about. And that's something that he wouldn't have learned if he didn't do that. Hence, the ZMET is born. So that's kind of how it's used in cultural anthropology. UX, user experience. Now, some of you are thinking right now, UX, I've never heard of collaging. I've never seen it done in the UX world. And it is gaining a lot of popularity. So I can tell you that you'll see this being used more in agency life because their roots, some of them are in the market research side in ad world where they're doing this kind of research on real ads. I can tell you of my experience with doing collaging for agencies. I've done them for Digitas, Neiman Group, MadPal, all different ones. And this, for some reason, they get it. They're in that agency world where they use these kind of techniques. So that's where it's kind of gaining momentum. But the whole reason we're doing this, it's not to figure out where to put the button on the screen, obviously. That's not what this kind of research generates. It's, does the person even need the button? Who is this person that we're designing for? What is the world that they live in so that I can better design for it? It's getting to that really deep stuff. So some people are like, well, this doesn't help me design a page better. It might not literally tell you where to put the button, but you are going to know that person better. And of course, I believe this because I'm a researcher, but you have to know the person. You have to care about the person if you're going to create something that works for them. Okay, so let's take a look at Dan's collage here. And what I'm going to do is actually have you step up here on stage, just so everyone else can see it. Oh. We are going to take a picture of it. All right, so which one do you want to talk about first? Do you have a favorite?
I like that one.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to take a picture of this. It'll be backwards, but at least you'll get to see it. Let me just take it. Whoops. Okay. 1 second. No, I can't bring it up. Well, I'll hold it in front because you can't see the rest of the interface. So this right here, as you guys can see, is a picture of a canoe. It looks like a family or something is holding the canoe up. You guys can see that, right? Okay, so let's discuss why you chose that picture. And it says here, it says, staying up to date with family.
Yeah, so like seeing what my brother and sister are up to, like, you know, my parents are on Facebook and they'll post pictures and videos, and we don't get to see each other a lot, so.
I was just going to ask that. So you don't get to see each other a lot. That's how you stay in touch. That's how I use it too, actually, because most of my family is in another state. So that's interesting. So, now, are most of the people that you're connected with, are they, you know, long distance, or are some of them local?
Family?
Or family or friends?
Oh, yeah, I mean, friends all over, but family's pretty local.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, some of the time, really. So it's a good way, like a quick way of seeing what they're up to.
Okay. So just so you know, as I'm having this conversation, which is very relaxed, I would just continue talking more about the connections he has, how does he make a Facebook friend. It could lead into a whole bunch of different areas. The thing that's nice about this is he decided, you know, just by choosing this picture, he chose the question in the interview. And we just led to this conversation. The trick is that this is an icebreaker, and it's my job to keep the conversation going. So let's try another one. Let's see. B. Mm-hmm. Well, that one's interesting.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Okay. All right, so everyone see this one? It's his head in the sand, and he's kind of yelling. You guys can see that? Okay. So why did you pick that picture? Yeah.
I don't know, just like memes or like just funny pictures that friends will post. It's entertaining. It's like kind of a quick break from work.
See, that's a great topic to talk about. Like, we could talk endlessly about what content he seeks out on Facebook. Oh, thanks. Great. Oh, good point. Watch your step there. I don't want you to step backward. All right, so that would lead to, you know, what content he looks at, how often he's going to Facebook. I could just keep asking follow-up questions on that until I run out and then talk about the next category. So let's do, I want to do that one if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So this one here, he has the caption freedom, and it looks like just the ocean, the sky with one person there. So why did you choose this picture? How does this relate to your experience using Facebook?
That one was more just, I'm sorry, that one was more.
Is that on? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that one was more just kind of a personality trait, I guess.
Can you hear?
No. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was more of just a personality trait?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I guess I like seeing pictures and stuff like that, but I'm more of that get out and go mentality, and I think that, I don't know, I just related to that picture.
So you related to that picture with, how about your Facebook usage of that?
Maybe not so much.
Okay,
usage.
This is good. So he picked out a picture that related to him. Like he liked it. It represented freedom, and he's a get out there kind of guy, I guess you could say, right? But when I got it back, I said, okay, that's good to know. How does that relate to your Facebook experience? He couldn't really connect it, which is okay. This happens, just so you know, this happens during a collaging exercise a lot. Images are powerful. They speak to us. And when you're in the mode, all of a sudden you start picking pictures that you just like, that just means something to you, anything. And it might stray from the topic. And that's okay. But as researchers, when you're doing this, you want to make sure to always bring it back to, well, how does that relate to how to use Facebook again? And if it can't relate, just say, okay, great. It tells you more about that person, but you don't want to include that in your research, right? And let's just talk about one more here. Looks like Don Norman. All right. So we've got this one.
And it's kind of another one, too, below it.
And the other one below it, you think that's related? Or
like inspirational stories, I guess I kind of got out of that. like I love reading inspirational stories online. I think it puts things in perspective.
Okay.
Like whenever it gets too hectic, or you don't think about like the important things in the life that you're living. Yeah, when you don't think about the important things, it kind of gets weighed down, and that's why I like reading those stories.
So how would you say that the majority of the content that's in your stream or your news feed, is that mainly inspirational for you, or do you have to weed through a lot of other things?
Like from the total that's being provided out there, is it related to me?
Inspirational for you?
I mean, it depends on the story, I guess.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know, like percentage-wise, how much I would take in, but if I see a story, like I'll post about it, share it with friends.
So I could talk more about, so how often are you posting? What kind of things are you posting? Are you finding inspirational things to post? It could just lead. And the whole point of this is just to open up different avenues of an interview to go down. So thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. All right, so you got to see a little bit about, just get a taste of what this was about. And you're also going to get an opportunity to do that at the end. Whoops, first thing I want to do is explain a little bit more about it, and then we'll get to an exercise. Okay, so let's talk about when to use this technique, because it's not a great thing to use all the time, right? The best time to use this is when it's really hard to talk to someone. It could be a personal topic, right? Something that's taboo, controversial, anything that makes it hard for that person to open up. I've done a lot of collages with a lot of sensitive material. I've done collages with cancer patients, patients with rheumatoid arthritis, muscular MS, and then recently I did a study with women to learn a little bit more about how they deal with their menstrual cycles. That's a really hard topic to just sit down and have, hey, I don't know you, let's talk about your period. These are good topics to use when you have to do a collage, or when you have to do an interview, and doing a collage is a good way to go about it. So anything like that, that's really hard to pull information out of people. On the flip side of that, though, you can use this for anything. I also did a study for PennDOT, which is the Pennsylvania Drivers, Department of Transportation, thank you. Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. So I actually had to do research with people to figure out how they felt about their commutes, how it could be made better. They were thinking of products to release for that. And we actually did a collage. I mean, it's a pretty dry, it's not controversial or hard to get people to talk about their commutes. But we did it with a collage, and they had a lot of fun with it. And what's great about it is you don't have to just do a collage. You could have your in-depth interview with your predefined questions ready to go, but instead spend 20 minutes at the beginning of that interview and do a collaging exercise just to ice break it, just to get people relaxed and doing something, which is always fun rather than just sitting and talking. And then go into your predefined questions. It's just a nice way to spark some conversation. So let's take a look at what this looks like in real life with some case studies. So this is some of the collages that some participants have made for me that I have permission to share. This one is from a chronic pain study. So we talked to people that suffer from chronic pain. And I didn't even honestly know, to be honest, that this existed, that there are people that have this, literally, it's called chronic pain. And at the end of the study, I spent 3 days talking to people with chronic pain, and I never felt more grateful in my life for my health, and it's amazing to understand what these people go through. And I really felt like I really did get a glimpse into that world after we did the collage, because we got to some really personal moments. And what we learned was that there are two options when you live with chronic pain. You can live with the pain, or you can live in a world that doesn't exist, just on narcotics, where you're not feeling anything at all. Those are it. Those are your two choices. And it's like really sad. But that really hit home for me, and I don't know, I could really empathize with them after doing this. So here's one. The person picked out this picture, and they said, "That's my daughter consoling me when I'm in pain." And so we talked about, okay, great. So how does this affect your family? How do they console you? How do you feel about that? It just led to that discussion. Rather than just sitting down and asking, so is your family affected by your pain? You know, this just came out organically because she picked that picture and it meant something to her. And it was a good conversation around it. Here's another one. A man picked out this one. This is how I feel. I have to stop work due to pain. And that led to a great discussion about how does this affect your work? You know, how many days do you have to miss? How does your boss feel about that? What do you do? And that again was a conversation that might not have happened if he hadn't picked out that picture. Because again, I don't live with chronic pain. I have no clue what that world is like. I don't even know what questions to ask because I'm so far removed from it. So it was a good way to get these topics out. This was hard. Suicide. So the participant picked this out, and I knew when it was in her collage, I'm like, at some point we got to get to this one, and I left it for the end because I was almost afraid to discuss it. And the thing that you have to be careful when you do a collage with participants is that it's very easy for participants to open up a door that they might not necessarily want to walk through. And you have to be careful of that. I could tell right away when we started talking about this that she wasn't really comfortable talking about it. Even though she picked it out and put the caption on there, she did get to the point that, yeah, the pain gets so bad that I have contemplated suicide. But I could see her almost welling up, and I'm like, ooh, like we just distract and go to somewhere else because I don't want her to break down and make her uncomfortable. So we take a break and regroup. But that's how powerful I think this is. I've had tears on numerous occasions talking about very heavy topics with this method. And of course, the goal is not to get people to cry. It's to get them to open up and tell their stories, to share their stories. But sometimes with personal topics, that does happen. And I think it's an amazing thing when you can get to that level with someone you just met. And I don't know that it really can be done in such a nice, delicate way without something other than yourself that they're reacting to. They're reacting to the stimulus, not necessarily you. Okay, so this is another one. When I'm in pain, I feel like I'm being swallowed up. Vomiting, we talked about, oh great. So this person took it very literally. And when this comes up, it's like, okay, so what are some of the side effects you're feeling and how do you deal with that? So you can see, it's all where you take it. Someone could pick out this picture and say, yeah, vomiting. And I say, okay, well, that's an obvious one. This was with a cancer patient. And just move on, like, okay, what's your next picture? And that's not the point. The point isn't just to move from picture to picture. It's to get the story and to ask follow-ups and to get more. It's like, okay, how do you deal with that? What else are you feeling? That's what it's about. So you don't want to jump from picture to picture very quickly. So Gerald Zaltman says that 95% of our thoughts and feelings are unconscious. They do not come out until something triggers them. And that's why a collage is so powerful. So let's talk about how do you conduct a collage. As you can see from the demo at the end, that it's very easy. It's not hard at all. One, choose your topic of interest. Now, with Dan, I said select out pictures that reflect your experience with Facebook. You can see here it says, same thing, select pictures that reflect your experience with X. Fill in the blank, whatever it is. So if you have an existing product, that could be your topic of discussion that you want them to pick pictures out. Or select pictures that reflect how you would and would not want the new website to greet you. Perhaps you're creating a new website and you need to get feedback. You could do a positive collage and a negative collage. When I do this, sometimes I'll have two separate pieces of paper and I'll actually specifically ask them to create two different collages for two different reasons. Another one, create a story about how you would or would not want it to approach you. What qualities should this service or product have? What qualities should it not have? You can do anything you want to do. You can pick any topic you want and word it any way you want. So the second thing, this is probably the hardest part of doing a collage, is getting the pictures. You need a lot. And a lot is, I'm going to say 150 to 200. Reason being, you don't want them to look at a deck of 30 and none of them speak to them. So the higher the number, obviously, there's going to be something that speaks to them. But also because you want it to be as random as possible. You do not want the pictures to have an obvious theme. Let's say that I'm doing a study on some new drug that just came out. I don't want overly medical theme in the pictures. I want it to be very random. So get a good mix of, you know, nature scenes, people, abstract, concrete. If you're going to include people, make sure you include all races, all genders, all everything. Just make sure it's just as random as possible. And don't use stickers as a note. So you'll see here that what Dan used for some of these are a sheet of stickers that I just had printed up at Staples. It was an experiment, and I think it failed. These are actually left over from a collage that I did. The stickers are great. It's easy for the participants to do, but it's very expensive to print this out. And it's an unnecessary cost. You don't need to do it. And then also, I've had it happen where participants will want to change their mind, and they already stuck it to their collage, which makes it kind of hard. But most importantly, look what happens when you think about it. If I have to do 5 or 6 interviews, right, in a day with different people, and if they peel off one, that one is not there for the next participant. I have to replace the entire sheet, and not just that one picture, because they're all stuck together. So that's, unless you cut them all up, it just doesn't work. So instead, I would suggest doing this. Print them out on paper and cut them up, and then just give them glue sticks or tape to use. And it just takes them right back to childhood. It works. It's fun to kind of get them doing something too, creating a little bit. Okay, so, and creating the pictures, I do want to mention that there's a lot of good resources out there for getting your pictures. In the slide deck that I'm going to share with you, or I think you might already have access to, at the end you'll see a link to an article about the collage that I have up on Smashing Magazine, and that has a lot of good links in it for getting free images, which is nice. That's really what I use. Okay, so create the collage board, and that's really just where the pictures are getting placed. I just use 8.5 by 11 paper. That's all I use. Sometimes if I'm doing, I want them to do 2 collages, a positive and a negative, I'll do ledger paper. I think it's 11.5 by 17. It's a little larger. Draw a line down the middle, put your positive, put your negative. I've seen some people get creative and do big targets and place pictures that, that get closer to the target of how you really feel. Whatever works for you. Again, you can get creative here and do whatever you want to do. I've seen a lot of different things. Moderate the study. So how does it happen? Set up the room. So you have a choice of doing 2 different things here. You can do what I did, and if you have a big enough table, spread them all out so the participant can just look at them and just kind of glance at them and just get a nice overall look. Or you can have them, give them a pile of pictures, that's 150 to 200 pictures, it looks like a ton when it's in their hand, and have them flip through each one. I do both. I do the flipping when I'm doing some field research. If I'm going to the participant's home or work and I want them to do a collage and I don't have a table at my disposal, I'll have them flip through them there. There's pros and cons to both. I think the collage is done quicker when they can just look at it at a glance, obviously. When I was doing the rheumatoid arthritis one, it was very taxing on the participant to flip through them, so we printed them out instead and had them all spread out on a table. So that's 2 different ways you can go about it. In the collaging exercise that you guys are going to do, you're going to be flipping through them instead. Give the topic and instructions. So like I said before, you can choose your topic, whichever one you want. The instructions, just leave it really vague. Some people will be like, well, how many pictures do you ask them to pick out? Is it, do you tell them to pick out 3 to 5? They're going to pick however many you tell them to. So I don't tell them a number. I just say, just set aside whatever speaks to you. And if they set aside like 20 or it's too much, I will ask them later. I'll say, okay, great, you have a good pile there. Let's narrow it down a little bit. And if you wouldn't mind looking through it, and just if you see any that or you're noticing a theme where you picked out 2 for the same reason, just keep the one that's more powerful for you and just get them to weed it down a little bit or narrow it down a little bit. So I don't give them much instruction as to how many pictures to pick out. And the most important part, I think, is if you're doing it this way, where you have them, in a room with a collage spread out on a table, I like to leave the room and just walk out for 5 to 10 minutes, because it's a little weird when someone's standing over your shoulder as you're looking at these pictures. And it could be taking them a long time, and it's more comfortable. It lets them relax a little bit. I come back in the room, and if they're done, great. If not, I just sit and quietly take notes or do something until they're ready to discuss it, and then we sit down and discuss it. When I'm setting up a room for a collage, I'll have the big table with the collaging material and then just another small table where we can discuss the collage. Okay, so probing carefully. Just like I said before, be very careful how you probe, but do probe. The whole purpose of this is to get their stories. So some people are a little timid, like some people will pick out something really great and they tell you the reason why, but it could lead to such a great discussion, and they're like, okay, great, let's see what the next one is. And it's like, follow up on that, ask that follow-up, get to that, to the meat of what they're talking about. So conducting the analysis, what you have to keep in mind is that this is not about the pictures. It's about the reasons they chose the pictures. So when you're reporting on a collage, I tend not to include the pictures because marketing folks especially get hung up on that, and they can't see behind it. Someone will pick out the big, the confident woman, going like this, like, that's what our branding should be. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. It's about why they chose that picture. So I report on that, on the stories, and I don't necessarily include the pictures in that. Now, here's some pitfalls to avoid. This just happened the other week. So I had a man doing a collage, and he picked out this, and he said, and his caption was, "She's attractive." I'm like, okay, great. How does that relate to your RA? He goes, it doesn't. She's just really attractive. I'm like, yeah, I can't disagree with you. She is. But again, it doesn't relate. So at that point, we just set it aside and just know that this will happen. And it's just natural. You have a huge pile of pictures to go through. At some point, you just randomly start picking out pictures that mean something to you and not necessarily relate to the topic. So always bring it back to the topic if that happens. And if they can't give you a good reason for how it relates, just keep that out of your analysis. That doesn't go into it. Here's another good one. So I had 2 different participants pick out the same picture for pretty much the same reason. It was a very powerful stimulus to them. It says, disgusting, gross. And I said, how does that relate to your commute? And it didn't. And they couldn't get it to relate, but they couldn't help but pick it because it spoke to them. And that makes sense. It's very powerful. So what did I do? I pulled the image from the bunch because it was too powerful stimulus. I didn't want that distracting them. And that can happen, I think, with these pictures. Sometimes I get asked about this a lot, remote collaging. Is that possible? It is. I don't know that I would suggest it. I do most of my research remotely for in-depth interviews and usability testing. Collaging I always do in person. I just feel that it's a deep conversation that you're usually having if you're using it because you want to get deep, usually. And I just feel like sometimes it's necessary to see that body language and to have that rapport with them in person. If you're interested in looking more about that, I haven't used this, but I've heard about it. Buzzback eCollage is a software that you can use to try and do remote collaging. But you could look at it as a fun thing, like just an icebreaker, again, for an interview, a phone interview that you're having, and give it a whirl. You never know. So now it's your turn. This is your turn to have some fun. And I like this because you don't get to sit and listen to me the whole time. You actually get to do this yourself, which brings it all home, I think. So in the center of most of the tables, you'll see a big yellow envelope, and that is your collaging kit. Now, not every table has one. I think there's only 13. So what I'd like for you to do is to go to a table with a yellow envelope, because these will be your groups that you're going to do your collage in. And you can feel free to open it up. What you're going to see are a stack of pictures, 2 pieces of paper. The paper, one is instructions, and one is just the paper that you're going to put where you're going to put the pictures on, and a glue stick. So I'll take a minute here and let you guys get in your groups, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And if there aren't enough chairs, just pull a chair up to a table if there's not enough. And I'll give you instructions for how to proceed in just a minute. I just want to give you guys a chance to get into your groups. There's some room at this table if anybody is looking for a spot. You guys got it? Okay. All right, so this is how we're going to start. So the first thing you have to do is choose one participant. So in your group here, one of you is going to be the participant. And the way that you're going to choose that person is whoever has experience with one of these three things. And I'm hoping one of you do. Finding childcare online. So if anybody's ever had to look for a sitter, a nanny, au pair, whatever it be, on Craigslist, on care.com, on Sitter City, if you've done that, you could be a candidate. Online dating, if you use match.com, anything like that, then you could be the participant. If you're dealing with a friend or relative or loved one who has a drug problem, then you could also do the collage. So right now, just take 2 minutes and pick who's going to be the participant if you have, if you can relate to this. If you can't relate to any of that, let me know. I have another one you can do. Does any group not have a participant that can't relate to either one of these? Okay, good. All right. All right, does everyone have their participant? You good? Okay, good. All right, so now everyone else at the table, you are now UX researchers. You are moderators / observers, whatever you want to be. Your job is to keep the conversation going. So the participant is going to pick out pictures that reflect their experience. I'm going to explain on what in a second. And as they're picking out the pictures, you want to probe very carefully on it a little bit further. So, you know, if it's online dating and they talk about a bad experience, you want to talk a little bit more about that. Get them to open up. It's all about getting that story. And this is what we're going to do. You are UX researchers that work for either care.com, for the people who are, for the participants that have used or trying to find childcare online. If your participant is dealing with a drug problem with a friend or a loved one, you work for drugfree.org. And if you are doing online dating, you work for match.com. We're going to assume that these companies are trying to learn more about their end users in order to provide better experiences for them, whether they be online or in terms of content. Drugfree.org has a lot of wonderful content on there, and they're trying to help people deal with drug problems. So let's just assume that drugfree.org needs to know more about their end users in order to give them the content that they need. So what content should they be providing? So that's what the purpose of this is. Let's assume you have to come out of this with personas. So that's what you're trying to get out of it. So here are the participant tasks. If you chose care.com, if you're looking for childcare online, pick out pictures that reflect your experience with finding childcare online. If it's Match, pick out pictures that relate to your experience with online dating. And if it's drugfree.org, pick out pictures that relate to your experience dealing with the drug problem of a friend or a loved one. Now, as each participant picks a picture, I would like the participants to glue them to the picture board that's there, the piece of paper. And as they're gluing it on there, just talk about it, and all the observers and moderators can just kind of probe a little bit more on that. So feel free. You'll have about 15 to 20 minutes to do your collages, and then we'll talk about it. Any questions? Yeah.
There was words.
See. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? All right, so what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about what everyone learned. So I don't necessarily, some of you probably got to some personal information that was fun to share in a small 10-person group that you might not want to share with the entire room, and I totally get that. What I'd really like to know is just how the exercise worked for you, and if you thought you learned more, or what did you experience any problems? And let's just start with this table here, and let me grab the mic. Okay. I think it's on here. So feel free to tell me, anybody who wants to, what collage did you guys do?
Online dating.
Online dating. Okay. So what did you learn?
We learned that despite having met someone very recently, she finds the process just very busy, very complicated. And then there's this one picture that I really thought was interesting. It's of a couple, and they're touching each other's shoulders and looking off in different directions, and she said that was the only positive one. And I really liked this idea of wanting to be connected to someone without being, focused on the same thing all the time. So that's what I took a lot away from it, but that's maybe the last thing we talked about, so I remember it the best.
Yeah. So what about the act of having this conversation through the images? What was that like?
It was great. It gave focus. There was a lot of pointing as she was explaining her experience. She would be like, and then this is, she just kept, every piece of the conversation kind of had an image to go along with it. For most of the conversation. So, it definitely, I think it got a lot of information out in a very short amount of time.
Good. Was there any trouble at all at any point, or any questions that you had doing the collage?
I don't think there was trouble. I noticed in myself that I was getting a little too conversational and saying a little bit too much about myself, and asking leading questions.
And that's hard to do on the fly, to not ask leading questions. Yeah.
I was going to say, I just noticed that the conversation seemed to drift in more of a personal perspective versus really being focused on Match.com and the experience and how does that relate and how do we improve that versus just trying to really understand her perspective on kind of online dating as a whole, but how do we tie that back? How do we improve the experience? What does good look like? And kind of getting focused on something that could lead to an action that we can take to maybe make things better.
Right, and that's what's hard is that, bringing it back to where how are you going to use this information? It does get personal very quickly. It's like you start learning about how people just date in general and not just necessarily online. But that's your user, and that's their world, and you really do need to understand that. If anything at all, even if it doesn't bring back oh, this is a great feature we didn't think of, that we could totally think of, it gets you to better understand their mindset, to have empathy for what they're going through, and if anything, that could provide better content. In the long tail, it just gets you to relate with the end user, and really no bad can come from that. But you hope that it can be as actionable as possible, but it does tend to go down that personal path. Okay, so I know that there was a couple on the back that did the drug one, drugfree.org. I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind, do you want to talk a little bit about what you learned?
Well, the first thing I learned is I regretted volunteering for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know you probably revealed more than you wanted to, huh?
But I think it did help uncover the players in that. There's the individual themselves, that either they've admitted that they have a problem or they hadn't, and that's a different person. And then all the other folks, the family members, spouse, etc. It really helped uncover a lot about who you're working with in that kind of a situation.
And the drug one, I threw in there, I'm sure you guys could tell when I was talking about the three of them, that one was the heavier one. And I was hoping there would be a few groups that would go for it, because I think that out of the three, that one was probably the most applicable for this exercise, because it is a sensitive topic. It's not something that people willingly just share with strangers. And that's what the whole purpose of this exercise is to kind of get to that scary stuff that you don't normally want to or have trouble doing. So I'm glad that you guys went for that one. So did you experience any issues with doing the collage or anything like that?
It's pretty useful, I think, in getting to who the people that are involved in it. I guess the personas of that are, and yeah, it seemed to work pretty well.
Okay, good. I'm always amazed by how quickly you get to personal stuff. Like they were saying, in a short amount of time, I learned a lot about that person, and it really, you can't help but reveal a lot when you start doing this. That's great. So thank you for doing that. And I know you guys did drugfree.org too, right? And you guys had, I think, what was an interesting outcome of that, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Sure. So we talked about that, and our solution was non-technological. It was back in the 90s for people that might have been musicians here. There was a lot of drug problems in town, and I was a musician. I had some friends that had some problems with that. So how do you outreach to those people when there isn't a web? So we are actually like, it probably wouldn't be .org. It was probably like just such as a drug-free whatever, and then you'd probably have to go to the concert venues and talk directly to people or do something like that. So
another avenue to reach people that kind of came out from the collage.
I guess the takeaway would be thinking of beyond the web or a technological solution. Like, don't limit yourself just to thinking about what you might be assigned to do in a technological capacity. Yeah.
And childcare. Did someone do the childcare collage you guys did? If you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about what did you guys learn doing the exercise? What was it like?
So I did the actual collage, and what I found was pretty interesting. All the pictures that I chose basically fell into just two categories. That I want to have fun with my husband, and I want my kids to be safe.
Yeah.
And they all the pictures, they just talked about the same thing. So I'm wondering if that's, how do you overcome that problem? Like if you're doing a collage and you're talking to somebody and they just come back with the same answers, like do you ask them to go back?
You know what? It is what it is. So if it really is like all the pictures you picked out could really encapsulate, there's just two reasons, and they all just kind of keep up, like there's 5 pictures, they all come back to the same reason. That's okay. It just kind of reinforces that theme for you. And if out of it, that's all there are 2 major themes, that's okay. That's just what you learned from it. And to me, it's pretty interesting. If you were to go back to like care.com, you really need to reinforce that message of security and of giving yourself a break, a night off, and that it's okay. Like, there's stuff that can come out of learning that about, at least just with the empathy of just like understanding what it's like to just like, I need a break, but I don't want to, I want them to be safe, getting them to understand that. There could be a 20-year-old designer on your team who does not have kids, who does not understand that mindset at all. And I understand it completely right now. I'm going through it right now. Getting them to empathize with that and understand what you're going through, to hear your stories of that, I think is what comes out of this. So if it's just 2 themes, it's just 2 themes, but I think they're great themes to get.
And the other thing that came out of that also was, how can we tie in those 2 ideas together? So if I'm looking for a fun evening out, how do I tie that in with childcare and then have everything on one website? So, I'm free Friday evening, what can I do, and how do I get childcare?
Oh,
and,
interesting.
it's like a correlation.
Yeah.
It's the next step.
Yeah.
So that's something that, just
to think about.
Yeah.
Very cool. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I was going to say that sometimes having those 2 really strong kind of guiding principles can help you remove things from the site that distract from those core things that connect.
And if you do it with enough people, you see that this is a dominating theme, then yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. So which collage did you guys do?
We did online dating.
Online dating, okay. So yeah, curious to know what you guys learned.
Well, 2 kind of main things. One was about, she chose like a picture that looked like a target, and it kind of got to how she felt about how random the folks were on the website, the guys that were there. It was really hard to actually get to the quality pool, and because it seemed so random. And then she had another one where I thought was interesting. She had a story about her son doing a portrait of her with some guidance from her, and she tried to post it, and they took it down because it wasn't a personal picture, and you're required to do personal pictures. And I thought that was a great story to sort of illustrate that you need to have alternatives. Pictures are important. Being able to see and feel safe is important, but there's this other side of the personality side of it that we want to understand. So
we were thinking that it would be kind of interesting to require people to include a self-portrait. Because, I have a fine art background, most people don't. And so how fun would that be to see how people choose to
draw themselves?
Yeah, represent themselves with, very, very clumsy tools. You'd find out a lot about the person.
That
Their
would be
sense of
interesting.
humor,
Yeah.
Their aesthetic, how much time they were willing to put into it. Just a lot of things you would discover if you asked people to do that.
That makes me think of like Yahoo avatars. Remember when that was popular, like Yahoo I Am, and everyone would have like, oh, I'm a painter, so I'd have like the painter hat or something. I don't know.
Also, we were talking about how a company called How About We has started to try to cut the kind of random universe problem by requiring that people post a date idea. And so people flip through and see a date idea with a picture and say, no, or yes, that looks intriguing. And that goes just so far, but they've started, and you have to pay for it, it's not good.
Okay.
But they've started to partner with Eater to have howboutwe.com, so then suddenly you have kind of a subset of people who share an interest and a context, like the Eater 38 restaurant map. You can already have a conversation.
So people who have
about,
something in common.
Yeah, have you gone to this one? I hated that, blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's a really intriguing kind of direction for online dating to go.
Very cool. Now, did anyone experience, I'm curious, anyone have any questions about doing this collage? If you were to go tomorrow and do this, would you have any issues? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I need
Yep.
this. Hello. So my general question was, I noticed some tables started talking about features. Our table did not go into features at all. Is that a bad thing? Are you trying to get at the person rather than the technology, or?
Good question. No, so I never get to features. Usually when I do this, it's rare that I do. Sometimes it happens, but they almost always never know the reason really behind why I'm doing this. They know that I work for a company that represents this. For instance, I just recently did one the other week for a syringe, believe it or not even an interface, but it was an experience with people. They were designing a new auto-injector pen. And they knew that I worked for a company, or I was doing the research for the company on behalf of them, and they started telling me, like, I wish the plunger was on the side, not the top. That's fine, but that's not the reason why we were doing the research. We needed to understand more about their environment that they do it, what their feelings are. Needles is a very hard thing for someone to give themselves a needle, and just getting to that nitty-gritty, like how they feel about needles and giving themselves injections and all of that stuff. So we weren't really there for features. It all depends what you're trying to learn, right? If that's really where you want to take it, you can. I think the technique really shines when it's really just trying to get to know the person and to empathize with them and just to understand their world better in order to design for it.
So then should you even tell them what company that you work for? Or
That's a good point. So depending on the study, I'll sometimes keep it blind. So when recruiting, we won't reveal who the client is, but that makes recruiting harder sometimes. People are like, I don't know who's doing this. It makes recruiting harder, but sometimes it's necessary. But most times, once they're recruited, and I don't have to worry about that bias, then I'll reveal at some point what this is all about. But it just depends. Sometimes it's good to keep the secrecy. Other times it's not. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Can you pass this information back on to designers and developers in the same way as you would use a mood board?
Absolutely. I think so. I think they get a lot out of it, especially designers. They can kind of relate to that. What I think is that anybody on the team who's having trouble just empathizing with who you're designing for should take part in the collage, if possible. Be your research buddy taking notes, your note taker for the day. Have them rotate and have them do, like, you're going to do 2 collages with me, the UX researcher, and then other people. It's a good empathizing tool. So just anyone who just needs to get in touch with, you don't have whatever affliction or whatever. You're not trying to open up a bank account at this. You're not even an investor yet. So we're going to talk to investors. You need to understand who they are, what their motives are. That's what it's about. Yeah.
So you have a video?
All the time. Okay. Yeah, I usually record them all the time. Yeah.
I have a question. So I can see this data being used for creating personas.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you would use it for actionable insights.
Meaning like where to put the button kind of thing?
Well, or anything, or they were talking about features, but if you think about the purpose, if the purpose is to understand the user, I can see creating personas to help you understand the user and making that as the deliverable.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if you're not using it to create personas, what do you do with it? You do 5 or 10 or 12 of these, then what do you do?
Okay, so good point. So we use personas to help us create, obviously user requirements. Does the person even need the service? Or now that we know that these are who are end users and how they're categorized, now how do we design for them? What services do we offer? But what if you're not doing personas? You already have personas, right? Would you even use this technique? I don't think so, because hopefully if you have personas already, they've been done through research. They're not assumptive personas, not based on people's assumptions.
How about if you don't have personas? And
if
you've
you
got this,
don't, then
and you've got this fast-moving, right? It's always that pressure on timeline and budget. If you don't have personas, but you want to understand your users better,
you got to do the research. There's no shortcut to if you want to know your users and you want to do personas. I've seen so many personas that are just based off of analytical data or data, data that nobody did any qualitative research behind. So to me, they're not vetted out. You have to invest a little bit of time into that. And it could just be one day talking to 6 people and just building personas off that is much better than doing assumptive personas. Yeah. Did that help answer?
What deliverables, on the other side of the question, what deliverables do you make from this?
Oh, so other than personas? Okay, so my what I've learned from this study gets back in the form of a report of some kind. I will sometimes, that's a good question, will code. So if I'm doing this, I will actually put a sticker on the back like A-1, and another one would be B-1, and I'll code each one. So I will actually keep a grid of how many people chose each picture. If I want to, at the end, put some quantitative data behind this and be just to see perhaps where the clustering is, and maybe the captions were similar and the themes, help me see where the themes are. That helps me do the analysis a little bit, so sometimes I'll do that. But really the deliverable is just a research report, and whenever I do in-depth interviews for personas, the outcome is personas or a research report or both. That's really what whenever I do in-depth research, that's usually what the outcome is. And then from there, we start building a product. It could be, it's a summary of what I found, but it's also good, quotes in there, user quotes, anything that really hits home that helps build that empathy that anybody who wasn't sitting in the interview should really hear. I really try to incorporate that. And just in some way make it that it's not some long, extensive thing that nobody's going to read. You want to try and make it very short to the point. And I like including the quotes. That really helps get people to get into it. And usually it works better if it's a presentation and not a report, because reports usually just don't get read. But since we're running low on time here, what I want to mention is I struggled to get these collaging materials here, and I refused to take them home. So one person from the group, from each group, can take them home if they want to. If there's more than one person that wants it, I think the person with the closest birthday should get it. Just put it there. You guys duke it out, and if some table doesn't want it and another table wants multiple, just be nice and distribute. But please don't make me come home with these. So if you want to learn more about this technique, the article that I have on Smashing Magazine is right there. There's a book by Gerald Zaltman, who I mentioned a million times. His book is great. How Customers Think. and customer intimacy, and of course, Malcolm Gladwell's blank is awesome. So if you really want to know how people think. So that's it. Thank you so much.